It's another beautiful day, and I just want to say welcome to another exciting episode of this program. In the past few episodes, we've talked about filmmaking from the perspective of the figurine. We started with the developmental stage, then we moved to the pre-production, where we talked about casting, we talked about how the crew was sourced, we talked about location recce, and a bit of the business side, some of the decisions we took, when it comes to dealing with partners and potential sponsors. Today, we're going to be talking about production. Remember that also in the last episode, I mentioned that I had a reference film when I started thinking about the look and feel for the figurine and some of the aesthetics. I saw Apocalypto and I said, look, I would love to achieve something that is close to that. For me to achieve that, I also needed to have my crew and cast in sync. So after we put all the cast and crew together, I remember that we all set out, and our first location was in Oshun, Mycom Hotel and Resort in Ada. And that first night, I had to screen the film to everybody, the cast and the crew. Why? Because I wanted everybody to have a clear understanding of the journey we're about to take. And sometimes if you explain some things to people verbally, they don't get it as much as visually presented. And Apocalypto did that, for us. And we had a movie night. And the next day, everybody was fresh with, okay, all right, let's go to the jungle, let's make it happen. And on that note, I would like for us to go on this short break, and when we come back, I'll take us into details of the production of the figurine. All right, welcome back. So on today, we're going to be treating art directing. Some people call it production design. People call it different name. But for me, art directing is so detailed, and it is one of the most key departments in filmmaking, one of the most key elements to the looks and feel of a film. I've always worked with a lot of people, but I mean, if you look at most of my films, except if Partnebo is not around, we pretty much work with Partnebo on most of my films when it comes to art directing and production design. And on the figurine, of course, Partnebo was the production designer. And under this department, you have makeup, special effects, and you have wardrobe, you have costumes, you have set design, you have props. All of these sub-departments are under art department or production design. The ideal thing is, he reads the script, then we sit down, he will tell me what he thinks, and I'll tell him, look, my original thought. Then he will bring in his professional idea. And I remember that in terms of costumes, we got OBJ, Bige on board, and I remember we gave her the script to go and break down. Bige handle costumes, and she broke it down, came back, and then myself, this is very important, myself as a director and also as a producer, the art director, the production designer, and also the cinematographer had to sit down to agree to what the costumes should look like. This is so crucial, and let me tell you why. The cinematographer's involvement is so key because, one, if you're building a set and your set designer is doing a certain color and your cinematographer is not involved to see if the color will be favorable to the entire scene. When I say favorable to the entire scene, this is also where the wardrobe person comes in. If, for example, the wall is painted red, not knowing to the wardrobe or the costumier is also making a costume that is red in color, then you now put someone in red against red background. I mean, it's going to look like, it's going to look like a mess. So it is important to have sync in all of this department. The director, the art director, the costumier or the wardrobe person, then the director of photography. Sometimes it depends on the feel and the style of the film. You can't have shiny fabric or shiny materials in front of the camera because they bounce light. So these are some of the things that when you have a wardrobe person, you need to break down all of these things. Another thing is, the costume needs to really depict the character. Take for example the character of Shola. Shola is a nonchalant, carefree guy who, to him, fashion means wearing herring. Fashion means rolling his sleeve, even when it comes to officiating. You remember the scene where he gets married, and of course Femi played the best man. Even in church, in front of the priest, Shola was chewing gum, and his sleeves were like up, and he was just that guy who don't give a hoot about a lot of things, while Femi is more proper, his shirt up to here, well buttoned. So they are two different characters. So some of these differences shouldn't just reflect in what they say, it should also reflect in how the kind of costumes that they wear. It should reflect in the kind of accessories that you put on them, and it should also reflect in their makeup, how they are made up, and and all of that. The other scenes at the beginning, we realize that Shola is a bit cultural. He wears a lot of things that depict Africa, while Femi, even though his father is an artist, but Femi is just an opposite of that. Wardrobe is so key to a production. Like I said, production design under that department is where all of this thing happens. If you have the wrong art director, it's going to affect the other layers of the department, because there will always be a lot of argument, because an average costume person wants to defend what they are pitching or what they have designed. An average makeup person wants to say, yes, this is how the eyelashes, or this is how the pencil should look. The art director is the overall head, and he's the one who's going to say, look, we can't do this because that. Okay, this is fantastic, let's retain. And they will now run everything by the director, because the director needs to now approve to say, look, this is my vision, we're on the same page. So I hope this has helped you, in terms of costuming, for film, but from the perspective of the figurine. Let's go on break, and when we come back, we talk about makeup and special effects under art department, art direction, production design. And now let's talk about makeup. Makeup and special effect for the figurine was so detailed, and we did a lot of pre-production work before the production. Let me also use this medium to say that was the first time Lola Maja was going to do a feature film. I think she heard about me and heard about what I wanted to do, and she said, look, and she saw Igbo, and she said, oh, let's do it together. And I remember I gave her the first draft of the script. Then she went to London, and we were talking, and she did a breakdown. And, we had to do scene by scene breakdown. And we discussed, okay, how is the priest going to look? Between when he died and when he's alive and when he died, we need to see a huge difference in, what it looks like. And Lola made some recommendations. She recommended we're supposed to get some contact lenses, a lot of things. And for me, I just wanted quality. I want success and all of that. And some of this you'll see in the figurine. At the beginning, you could see some things we also learned and picked from Apocalypto. There was some mold that we built on Gogome, so rest in peace, the priest, who played the priest. And they had to also fill his face with more beard. They did a lot of things on his face. But when he died, and we see the bloated body on the water, if you look into his eyes, you see that his eyeball, the color already changed. Lola Maja and her team did detailed pre-production and production work on makeup. Another thing we also did in trying to differentiate the characters, I had to pierce my hair. I don't normally wear earring, but for that scene I had to pierce my hair, and Lola did it on the spot. I remember that day we were filming at the NYSC camp, and look, in the shadow, because that is also very important. There's 7 years difference in the film, and because we wanted people to see that huge transition between the first 7 years and the 7 years after, we decided to shoot everything the first 7 years before we move to the 7 years after. That slows down a little bit, because the looks had to really change. In fact, after the 7 years after, if you look at my character, I had to cut my hair, low cut, and that was the design. We said, okay, first 7 years, let him wear his punk, his dreaded punk, and the 7 years after, they already have money, is cool and all of that, and we had to change the look. If you also look at Femi's character, mine is Shola. Femi's character also, the 7 years before, during NYSC, we had to feel, the front line of his hair. Lola did a lot of magic to make him more geeky. He wears glasses, and all of that. And 7 years after, we had to remove all of that and make him look more calmer, modern, and, more tushed. And this also was agreed by all the department, majorly the art director, and that's Pat Nebo, myself, and Lola. I mean, the three of us decided and agreed how each of those characters, would look. Like I said, production design altogether, art direction altogether plays very key and vital role in the entire outlook and success of a film production. All right, now let's talk about set design. Set design is another key and major department under production design. And in some places, like in Hollywood and the rest, they have studios, and they build almost all of these things in studios. And the sets are built, everything is set, the lights are rigged already, the cameras are there, the director just comes in, he sits, and he directs the actors. But here is a completely different ball game, because we do more of location shoots. With location shoots, when you're reading your script, a lot of time the description, the action description does not state the aesthetics, the full aesthetics of what the room should look like, or what the road should look like, or what the ambience should look like. It is the call of a director and the art director to decide what all of those spaces should look like. And this is not a joke. This is something that, for some directors like myself, once I have a script, I start imagining the looks and feel and what the ambience of each location should look like. But what if you have that in your head, but you don't have access to that kind of location? What do? It means you have to find a way to still make the job happen by putting together something similar. And that is where Partnerable comes in, because it will always create magic. Set for figuring, some sets were built, and some sets, were locations that we touched and, had to make them into what, we need. All the 7 years before, the sets were all, done in Osun State. We had to convert some people's houses to sets. Like Chief Morino's house, where we shot the professor's office. We actually set that in his living room. We moved things from his studies and all of that, moved them to the living room. This was a location that was not recorded originally, because we weren't sure where we were going to shoot and who was going to even play that role. Chief Morino Yelami, the ASA of Iragbiji, played the professor, and we said a lot of things, around his house. The forest where they had the NYSC walk and all of that. All of that was set somewhere around Mycom Hotel and Resort. Some scenes were set in Oshogbo. The NYSC was in Oshogbo, and what we had to do, we made use of the entire environment, like the dormitory, the room where the NYSC and the cadets were. That is the original NYSC room, and we had to just agree with them to use the space, and we rearrange the place a little bit and to give us what we were looking for. But the 7 years after that, we shot in Lagos, and that was tough. Okay, the script says Lagoon House, but I mentioned this during the pre-production. We couldn't get Lagoon House, so we settled for a beach house. Now this beach house, it's somewhere in Ilashe where you can only get by boat, and it is just one house, beach house with 3 rooms, and we were 20-something cast and crew, and that was the only space available to us to use. But the thing is, we had to set the living room, we had to set the child's bedroom, we had to set the parents' living area, we had to set a lot of things in that just small space. But the thing is, we made it happen. We went through a lot, on that location. But the bottom line is, Padnebo was there and with his team, and a lot of times if I one room, we converted to a study. If you look at the room, the study where Shola, was on computer, and where Femi that's Ramsey, who had that conversation with Linda, who is Fonlola Ofiebi. All of that we set even within the same building. Film is make-believe. You just have to, make it work in a way that it is believable artistically, and also the ambience depicts whatever it is you're trying to, interpret. And generally, I think the set designer and everybody in set department really did well, as far as the figuring, is concerned. There's a whole lot more. Now let's move to props. What is props? Props means properties. All of the things we use, in setting sets. For example, chair could be set and it could be props. Car, normally, in a film, car is normally a prop, and these are things that you put on set. So set and props, they work together. Padnebo was also in charge of that, and they did amazingly well in charge of, props. So we've talked pretty much a lot about, production, where we're focused on production design and art direction. And we've covered costumes, we've covered makeup, we've covered set design, we've covered props, and a lot of things that are very key. And we've talked about why all of these elements needs to sync for there to be a good production. In the next episode, we're still discussing production, and we're going to be discussing cinematography. And I'll also shed a lot of light on the role of grip in production. And till then, it's still me, Kunle Afolayan. See you in the next episode. Ire.